America Rising and the dumbest bill in America. This is Mark Fisher with Mark and the Millennials. And joining me today is Millennial Garrick Ross. And of course, Christopher Hopkins, our assistant producer, and Adam Katora, our producer. How you doing,
well,
Garrick?
It's another day in paradise. Nothing but time and a great waiting game at this point.
Yeah, the quarantine podcast.
I've just reached the level of, I think, just sheer boredom every day. It's just,
And we're able to stay, reasonably far apart. We're social distancing while podcasting. Yeah. Just so, the authorities, when they watch, God forbid.
Yeah, we can talk about the news, give people some information, all while from the safety of this table.
Exactly. But it's a long table that enables you to separate from each other, just so you know, police, because God forbid they come here and they give me a $5,000 fine.
Yeah, we'll imprison you up to a year, Mark.
Which some states are doing, apparently. Yeah. But you know what? America is rising, and that is the name of the podcast. And thankfully, the balance of power is shifting back to the people from the government.
Yeah, I think the popular, viewpoint at this stage is, for as much as the disease really does suck and any infection is too many infections, we got to go on with our lives. We have to open back up the economy and people need to work because, for every person that's getting sick, you have 3 or 4 people losing their jobs and, unable to support themselves and in, probably a much worse place. Absolutely.
And we're going to start off with, of course, our favorite network, MSNBC. I say that, of course, with great sarcasm. MSNBC host Stephanie Ruhle interviews Jim Messina. Now, Jim Messina is the former deputy chief of staff for Barack Obama. And Stephanie Ruhle interviews Jim Messina, and she suggests at one point, this is the host of MSNBC, a host, that maybe Biden should set up a shadow government in preparation for when he wins, or just set up a shadow government.
That's just a weird clip. Well, yeah. We'll get into it, but the concept on its face is just weird because
it shows you there's a deep state. The deep state
also
is alive.
If you because this is in relation to his press conferences and where they believe he's espousing propaganda and the like. Who's going to pick up a Joe Biden press conference? It's probably the most boring thing you could ever watch. If you want a Joe Biden press conference, go watch his Facebook Lives or his streams. They're absolutely just boring and uninteresting.
Can he even do it? Can he even have a press conference where he is absolutely capable of, following through with any thought?
Any kind of challenging question. If Biden's not on a prompter, it doesn't look good. Let's not all forget that the debates. He never won a debate. I don't even think he did good in any of the debates. He just kind of stood on stage and deflected questions the whole time. And
they criticized him because he was the front runner.
But he he was never on the attack or was life-changing on the debate stage. I'm not going to watch Joe Biden debates and talk about how it was a master class of political debating. It was far from it, and I'm sure his whatever show he puts out there is going to be even worse if he didn't put one out there.
So here is MSNBC host Stephanie Ruhle, and she's interviewing Jim Messina, the former deputy chief of staff for Barack Obama. And listen to this clip. Here it is.
When you see President Trump with his erratic leadership and his daily, clown show press conferences, to have real upstanding leaders like Barack Obama and Elizabeth Warren talk about Joe Biden in personal terms, the kind of leader he would be, that contrast is really important right now. And it's a contrast that the Biden campaign is going to bank on going forward.
Then do they need to do it in a bigger way? What did you just call it? The president's daily clown show? That's his press briefing. Should Joe Biden be counter-programming that? Should he be creating his own shadow government, shadow cabinet, shadow SWAT team, and getting up there at a podium every night saying, here's the crisis we're in, here's what we need to do to address this?
Yeah, so should he have a shadow government? Should Biden set one up with an entire cabinet?
I don't know, but I want to see what a shadow SWAT team looks like. That sounds real fun.
It sounds like, kind of a dictator, like a Marxist society, a shadow SWAT team.
She's probably kicking herself from that at the end of that programming. Oh, that's terrible.
They're probably members of the death panels, the shadow SWAT team, just saying.
Oh, God. That's something. What is he, like we just talked about. I wouldn't watch it. I don't think anybody else would watch it. And I don't think...
By watch, you mean you would not spend the time watching
a press conference
about
where
coronavirus.
He kind of goes up there. He doesn't have any authority. He doesn't have any power to do anything. It would all just get up there and be feel good, or just him dictating what he thinks we should do. It'd be like, if any of us got up on stage and told our elected leader what to do. It's effectively the same. He just happens to be Joe Biden.
Yeah, it's true. But, the podcast title is America is Rising, which it definitely is. But, of course, MSNBC wants Joe Biden to rise and have his own government because they, of course, are very hopeful now that he's the nominee, the appointee of the Democratic establishment, that they hope that, of course, he can set up a government and just kind of run things. But, there's so many deep staters already in the Trump.
He announced he's forming a transition team in the event that he does win already. I mean, I will say, though, Mark, before listening to that clip, I almost kind of forgot that we had an election going on right now with all this going on. And it shows you how little Biden's been able to, capitalize on anything.
True.
Basically, everybody dropped out and endorsed him, and, most people are too concerned with all the things going on in their life to be even worried about a presidential election right now, which is why I think it's also funny that MSNBC keeps going out and, propping him up and pointing to Biden and trying to, elevate his profile, and CNN and the like of them, because, I don't think people really care right now. And I don't think that, the election is foremost.
They're too worried about their jobs and feeding their families and their businesses and their children and their grandparents and their parents. I mean, that's what they're worried about.
Yeah, I mean, there's tens of millions of unemployment cases across the nation, and that excludes people who are self-employed 1099 contractors and aren't ordinarily available.
So there are in excess of 20 million unemployed currently, but we're not counting those individuals who are self-employed because we just aren't. Because they haven't filed for unemployment.
There's a lot of people, probably a good third of the country, who really is worried about how this is going for them right now.
No doubt.
They have better things to worry about than Joe Biden on TV.
And that's why America does need to rise. And it's interesting. They talked about a shadow government. MSNBC did, of course, host Stephanie Ruhle. But the fact of the matter is John Kerry's been engaged in a shadow government for a while, doing shadow diplomacy with Iran, telling Iran, don't worry, he's only here for 4 years. Don't worry, Iran. He's only here for 4 years. So, just wait it out, and then we'll be able to lift all of the, the various sanctions against your country, and then we're going to be able to do business again, just like it was before.
John Kerry should go back to running Heinz or something, because I'll tell you what.
Well, he married into that fortune. It's not his fortune.
Not his fortune.
Yeah, he's a kept man, just saying.
Yeah, but, John Kerry's going out there, and like you said, he's talking on behalf of the United States. He's undermining our foreign affairs and our interests, and it's bad. There's no way of explaining it otherwise. It's just an irreparable harm that is being caused on our foreign affairs establishment by having two different types of people, going out there and saying two different types of things. And, it casts doubt into the Iranians' heads. And maybe if we were achieving some kind of political, objectives, he undermines them. He probably gives them false hope. He makes them more likely to avoid capitulating to us. And it's counterproductive.
Yeah, but there's no doubt that there has been a shadow government going on since Trump got elected, because there was always the plan that Hillary would be elected and things would continue as always. In other words, trade would continue with China, American jobs and the American middle class would continue to be gutted, the Midwest would continue to be gutted, the blue-collar workers would continue to lose any kind of gains that they had hoped to have.
It's the nature of the beast, though. I mean, as long as you're in power, there's always going to be an opposition, and they're going to always try to do what they can to speak on your behalf or speak over you. And I think a bit of it's on the Trump administration to continue to chug along and achieve his goals and conduct his platform and be better than that. Make sure that even though John Kerry's going out there and that there's, this opposition, that he's always, one step ahead of them, and he's making it hard for them to work because he's getting results.
Sure.
And so you just got to keep chugging along, be better than that.
So in The Federalist, it's an online newspaper, periodical, if you will. They have an article. It's entitled, "The Lockdown is Loosening, Whether Government Likes It or Not." And I am personally thankful for the lockdown loosening, but obviously, we have a long way to go because people need to get back to work. And here's a short excerpt from the Federalist article. It says as follows: "Over the next week or two, the balance of power of the government and the will of the people will continue to shape the coronavirus response. But that balance is beginning to shift in favor of the people. This is America, and it's Americans, not our government, that will ultimately decide when this cloud lifts. This is as it should be. And thankfully, leaders like Trump and Cuomo understand this. The United States began in earnest with the words, "We the people." The coronavirus lockdown will end as a result of that very same authority. Well written, well said, and it's also very timely because while we on this podcast, Mark and the Millennials, we clearly take the deaths very seriously and this coronavirus pandemic very seriously, we also take very seriously the fact that people cannot be pushed into poverty, which is also
destitution and
its own death.
Yeah,
its own death, and that makes things even worse.
And I appreciate that he mentioned that it wasn't, just a Republican view that we need to open back up the economy. I appreciate that we're trying to frame these and that this is an American thing and that this is both sides of the aisle saying that, we do need to combat the coronavirus because it is a big deal. It's not nothing. It has really been, it's a fundamental impact and it's going to change the way we live our lives for at least the next 100 years. But I appreciate that he's acknowledging people like Cuomo and Trump and Gavin Newsom in California and other Republican governors who have all collectively said that it's time to combat the coronavirus effectively, but we also need to open up the economy. And so it's not going to be just like they say, where we flip a switch and we all walk out of our homes, hug each other, and go to work. It's going to be about us doing this safely while also working. People are going to start teleworking.
Do millennials want to go back to work? Millennials?
I want to go back to work.
Did you get your $1,200? Did you get your $1,200 check?
I don't qualify. I was claimed as a dependent.
Oh, yes. So you're still dependent. So your parents got the money
for
but
tax
not you.
Purposes.
Are they going to share They're going to share 600 of the 1,200 with you?
My dad didn't even get it either. He makes too much.
Okay. Well, that's a nice problem. Hopefully, he's still employed.
Yeah, he works for. He's an engineer.
So, okay. Yeah. How about you, Mr. Assistant Producer Christopher?
Nope.
Okay. Well, that's too bad.
Same issue.
Yeah. Same issue, right? Because apparently you had to have actually filed last year, and if you were dependent last year or you didn't file last year, you're not eligible for the $1,200. But many millennials, of course, did get it. But you guys are at the kind of tail end of the millennial generation.
So last tax break, it's the last tax season. I was claimed as a dependent, but in the last year, my circumstances have personally changed. Where I'm an emancipated, I've graduated college, I have a job and everything. But because of that filing, I was cut out of the loop, but I'm not mad about it.
You'll be paying for many years in taxes to pay off this $2.2 trillion
I think there's people who need
stimulus.
it more than I do. I'm fortunate. Aside from doing this, I have a good job that I still have a job right now, and it pays me well, and everything's fine for me. So I hope other people get that benefit and that they're taken care of because of it.
Very good. So America is indeed rising. Governor Whitmer, certainly they're rising in Michigan, because Governor Whitmer, on her recently randomly selected bans, decided to ban travel between homes. We talked about this kind of briefly in another podcast, but we actually have a clip on this where there's a travel ban between homes. You can't plant your garden, or you just can't landscape at all. You can't go golfing. Just really random stuff. We have a clip on this, and here it is.
So we just had snow. I've got snow on the ground here in Michigan right now in Lansing. We're expecting, up to 30 inches in the Upper Peninsula. The fact that we're cracking down on people traveling between homes or planting or landscaping or golfing really for a couple more weeks isn't going to meaningfully impact people's ability to do it, because the snow will do that in and of itself.
Yeah, the snow is the problem. So I think Chris said this earlier. So then why do it at all? Why have bans in place at all if the snow's stopping people from planting or from golfing?
Well, I will say though, Mark, the snow didn't stop about a couple thousand.
Oh, it's thousands.
Thousands of people from driving through the capital of Michigan to protest her convoluted order that made no real sense and was, real wishy-washy. But, good for them. Like we said, America's rising, and, that they're not going to take a lot of this lying down, and that they're going to make sure that their voices are heard, and that people aren't going to continue to walk over them in the name of the pandemic.
Well, because politicians are really overstepping their authority.
Right.
And it's certainly, on the one hand, understandable that you don't want more people infected, but to tell people that you can go to Home Depot or to a hardware store, but you can't buy a car seat for a child, and you can't buy seeds to prepare for your garden,
like you said,
you can't buy landscape materials. Who the heck does she think she is?
Yeah, like you said, I mean, I certainly appreciate a lot of the initial sentiments about being safe, and I certainly understand that people need to stay in their house, as much as humanly possible and avoid large gatherings and things like that. But that doesn't also mean that I shouldn't be able to go and buy things that make my life easier while I'm home. Like, if I want to do some landscaping while I'm home, I should have the right to do that. It's my house, it's my castle, and I have the right to both defend it, but also improve it and do things within it. And it's
going to help your neighbor to do it as well. But apparently you can't, because there's a travel ban. She put so Trump has a travel ban from China to, but her travel ban is you can't visit your neighbor. What an idiot.
Nope.
So in the paper it says the protest was dubbed Operation Gridlock.
Where they drove down the Capitol and clogged up the intersections and just drove past her. I heard it was half a Trump rally, but I also heard it was also half protesters. I mean, that's a good amount of people who, regardless of political affiliation, just were like, I just want to go back to work.
It's awesome. It's awesome. So, on Mark and the Millennials, we also like to talk about funny things. We actually have a funny thing to talk about, how America is rising as well. And this is a police department has a tweet where they warn residents in their town to wear pants when they go out to their mailbox to check for their mail, to see if the mail is there. So apparently there is a problem in this town whereby maybe individuals, I'm not sure, are walking out their front door in the town, and yes, they are wearing underwear, but they're not wearing pants, and they're wearing a shirt, I presume, and they're going out to the mailbox to check their mail, and apparently it has offended some people. And so the police department, rather than showing up and making a big scene, decided to tweet about it, which I think is a great sense of humor, especially in this age of police departments overreacting or being given authority by governors to kind of overreact and threaten people with fines or worse. So here's what the article says. It's sometimes tempting not to get dressed for the day while we're all at home on quarantine, but heading outside to get the mail without pants? It's apparently a problem in a small town called Taneytown. It's actually written as Taneytown, but it's pronounced Taneytown. The Taneytown Police Department issued the following warning on Facebook Tuesday. Please remember to put pants on before leaving the house to check your mailbox. You know who you are. This is your final warning. The town has a population of 7,000 people.
I can just picture it now. Some dad just woke up, rolled out of bed. Well, I'm home. I might as well go get the mail. Walks right out in his skivvies and back in, and probably some horrified child down the road saw it or something. That's their kid.
It must be fun living in a town where there are 7,000 people or less, because everybody knows everybody else.
Everybody. They got Jim down the road. He was walking out in his underwear again.
And they're like talking and texting one of their other. Did you notice that he's out there again getting his mail?
It's the third day in a row.
Why does he think we want to see this?
Oh man, I'll tell you what. It has been fun in a weird way, all of this, because there's
quarantine,
because there's just so much fun stuff like that coming out. Like, a lot of the meme culture is hilarious. Like, I saw a good one the other day, and it was they spoofed the JFK speech, and they said, ask not what sitting on your couch can do for you, but what sitting on your couch can do for your country. And it's just stuff like that all over the place. And it's been a riot.
That's good.
Getting on the internet and finding some of these memes or some of these like jokes that like police departments or other people have come up with. It's been hilarious. So and never underestimate America. We find everything funny.
But it hasn't stopped Alec Baldwin from tweeting crazy stuff again. So Alec Baldwin, of course, as most of you know, he's a famous actor and he's from a famous family. He has a couple of brothers that are actors too.
4 of them.
4.
There's 4 total. In the family.
4 Baldwins total.
Yeah.
And they're all they're all in kind of the acting field more or less, at least I think. But Alec, of course, is the one that is super duper far left, super crazy. And he literally tweeted out through the HAB Foundation at Alec Baldwin, ABF at Alec Baldwin, that this crisis may reveal some unintended consequences. Many may remain working at home, thus reducing traffic and eliminating the need for superfluous office space. That's a rough word. Some manufacturing may cease and never return for a variety of things that we don't really need, like the airline industry. In other words, he's happy that people aren't creating more pollution, and then goes on to say, and which is not a bad thing as the environment is concerned. In other words, no one's flying, no one has jobs, they're not really in their cars very much, and they're staying home, they're unemployed. Many people are having difficulty being able to buy food, let alone be able to afford food. They can't pay their mortgage or they can't pay their rent. And Alec Baldwin says, well, this is a good thing, because why? Because Alec Baldwin is wealthy.
Alec Baldwin probably has a private charter jet.
Yeah, of course.
He doesn't have to worry about it.
He doesn't fly commercial.
No.
So here's his final thought in his tweet. The coronavirus may be God's best hope for environmental stewardship. Alec Baldwin, are you? He's happy that people are dying.
God.
I mean, without actually saying so, literally, he's tweeting this, and this is a good thing for the environment. Too many people on the earth, according to Alec Baldwin. Sick. I just want to, I mean, do millennials, does this affect you, whether or not you would see his films?
First of all, I've never really seen a lot of Alec Baldwin films that I can recall off the top
The
of my
Hunt for Red
head.
October, okay? Tom Clancy.
I think that was the year I was born, Mark.
Okay, well,
for reference.
Excuse me. Okay, I'm sorry.
I don't go out of my way to watch a lot of Alec Baldwin films. I can't even name 3 off the top of my head. He's more just the guy that I see in all those commercials for, I think, Enterprise or whatever, but that's beside the point. You know, I think there's two ways you can look at this. One, I think the way he presents it is absolutely irrational and kind of out there and a little crazy, actually a whole lot of crazy. But I think if you want to talk about the concept of, you know, how, you know, people are going to change the way they conduct business, I think there is like a slight merit to what he's saying. I think you're going to see a lot of people realize that they can telework because we live in the 21st century and there's no need to go into the office every day. And there might be, you know, a lot less car travel to and from work now as a result. And if that's what happens, I mean, cool. That's a free market concept bearing results where people realize that is
changes, the individual decision, a personal decision. Not some Hollywood elite telling you that you shouldn't travel to work.
Yeah,
because,
exactly.
You know, now that he has his, he doesn't care whether that you're actually trying to work and get ahead as well.
Exactly. I mean, so, you know, let people make those decisions and make it on their own. But we don't need Alec Baldwin, you know, shouting from his throne right now that we should all stop traveling and going on air travel, because I don't know, how are you gonna get from, you know, California to Hawaii on your nice vacation? Are you gonna take a boat, or are you gonna take the train like AOC thinks you should? You know, there is times where air travel is particularly necessary, and you know, no matter what we're gonna do, there is gonna be some kind of carbon footprint. But it's about, you know, making our carbon footprint as neutral as possible, not eliminating all the luxuries of life.
So get this: for not wearing a face covering in one state in the United States, you would face possible imprisonment or a fine up to $5,000 for not wearing a face covering. This is according to the Daily Wire and other news sources, and this is in the state of Maryland.
Oh my goodness!
You could have a police officer stop you and say you need to wear the face mask, or I'm going to give you a ticket for $5,000.
Starting Saturday, correct? Or is it already in effect?
It's actually technically in effect, but I think in theory probably, you know, 1 or 2 more days, and then they'll probably start cracking down. But get this, America. This is why America does need to rise, because we shouldn't, on the one hand, play down the health crisis that we're in, but on the other hand, if you're in a town in Maryland or if you're in the countryside and you're taking a walk, why in the heck would you wear a mask? Because you're living in a not very this is the problem with government. It's always one size fits all. Yeah. And then you're empowering, as the governor, a bunch of people who are in the police departments, many of whom, not all, but many of whom are just looking for an opportunity to enforce this really draconian and, quite frankly, I think, crazy order where you have to wear. And by the way, there's plenty of evidence that even when you do wear these, it's not protecting you or the other people, because it's so infinitesimally small, you're not really protecting people.
The design of the face mask is not to protect you. The usage of it was meant to protect other people. So basically, if you had it and you were, you know, giving out respiratory droplets or any kind of particulates, it'd get trapped in the mask. And I think a lot of people also don't know the general, you know, hygiene and standards necessary to effectively use a mask. You can't just keep putting the same one on, taking it off. Sure. If it's got stuff on it, then that's on you. It's, you know, about using disposable things. It's why they say that using gloves is no different than using your hands. You probably should just use your hands and wash your hands. And then
wash them constantly, right? With warm water, and if you can, hot water.
Now back to this rule though. I've seen it already go wrong. And there's a video circulating the internet in Pennsylvania and Philadelphia specifically where there was a man riding the bus not wearing a face mask. Now at the time that they didn't have a rule in place, and there was even a sign on the bus that said you didn't have to wear a mask. However, the police came on and physically dragged this man off the bus. like 6 or 7 of them. So you're violating social distancing, you're getting up in his space, you're having a physical confrontation over this. How hard would it have been to just give the man a mask?
Agreed. And here's my problem too. I completely agree. But I also believe that governors are putting the police, the state police and the local police, in a position of really unnecessary positions with the public at large. To be a police officer,
it's combative,
it is, because you're being told as a police officer you have to enforce this, and the police officer is like, look, I live in a town with 5,000 people, and there's plenty of space.
I've been to these kids, baptisms, their parties.
Yes.
I'm neighbors with all these people.
I think
a better approach, rather than just being like, oh, if you're not wearing a mask and there's you're in the grocery store line, just, hey man, here's a mask. Would you mind putting it on for me? Or, hey, you really know you should be wearing a mask. And then
and you can make your own mask. To be fair, I mean, you don't have to actually buy a mask, because it's, of course, almost impossible to buy a really high-end mask, which brings up the other point that I kind of mentioned already, which is if you're making your own mask, it's probably really not effective at all as compared to the really professional masks, which we can't buy. And oh, by the way, in February and March, every person in the United States was told, you don't have to wear a mask in public. It's not really required. It's really not going to do anything. And now suddenly it's all the rage. Now you got to do it, or pay $5,000 or go to prison.
Yeah, it's crazy how quickly it's getting I wasn't going to say out of hand, but it's crazy how quickly the guidance changes, and then people went from 1 week thinking that I don't have to do this because it doesn't work to I have to do it because apparently now it does work. And it's like, what magical laws of physics changed in 1 week that has made the whole concept?
It was a suggestion, now it's a mandate.
Yes.
And that's the problem with government, especially when we give all these powers to them. So meanwhile, in a county, it's not just Fox News, but I think The Hill and also Gateway Pundit reported that in a certain county in the United States, you could have food and bread lines. Why? Because the county reports that if you have a name, your last name starts between A and C, you can shop on the dates ending with 0 and 5. If you have a name that ends with D to G, you want to go shopping, then you can actually go shopping. It's so complicated. If it ends with the date ends with a 1 and a 6, and so on. And it's so complicated. And of course, in a very small little print, they put, well, this is what we would like for you to do, but it's optional. It's kind of optional. Then why do it if it's optional? Number one.
Because you're just confusing people.
And by the way, when you do this to people, the average person reads this and like, oh my gosh, I've been hearing mandates now for almost 3 months, right? For almost 3 months, we've been scared about this virus, and we've been told again and again, now we have a new regulation, now we have a new mandate, now we have another one. So people see this, Garrick, and they say, when are they going to make this permanent, even if it does say it's voluntary? And wouldn't this cause a run on the shopping food marts
ahead of time,
so that people would just empty the shelves? So, so I'm going to actually reveal who this is. This guy's name is Dr. Polsky. He's the health officer. So most counties and municipalities, even small towns throughout the country, have a health officer. Sometimes they're employed by the local government, sometimes they're employed by the State Department, but they nonetheless have a health officer. This health officer's name is Dr. Polsky. He is probably the dumbest health officer in the state of Maryland. We should do that, from time to time. The dumbest bureaucrat in the United States. Well, this is the dumbest bureaucrat because he literally put this into place, immediately went to national news, made him look like an idiot because he is an idiot, and everybody was contacting me because, by the way, podcast listeners, it's my county. It's the county that I'm from. And this idiot put this out there, and basically it's a mandate, and he's saying to everybody, oh, but don't worry. So then he put a new mandate out, and said, well, I just want y'all to know, I was just putting this out there because it was voluntary. You don't have to follow it. But it doesn't.
What's the point?
Then what's the point?
Also,
but because we're afraid they're going to make it a mandate, because that's what's been going down.
And it was so convoluted, Mark. You explained to me how it's supposed to work, and for the life of me, I could not process what was just said. I don't understand. I would have no idea.
It's hard to read.
I'm supposed to go. It's hard to read, and quite frankly, man, if you're hungry and you need food and you're running low, I'm not waiting until 5 o'clock Thursday because my last name ends in R.
Exactly.
I'm going to the store when I need to go to the store.
And by the way, when you combine that local government mandate with what the state did and saying that if you $5,000 fine or imprisonment, you start connecting the dots together and you say there is such a disconnect between the local governments, the state governments, and so forth, and the federal government. And it's so Byzantine. I don't know what I'm supposed to do or what I'm allowed to do. Yeah. And that's why America needs to rise, because this is out of control.
And think about it. You live in the north. I'll just use where I'm from. You live in southwest New Jersey, so you're on that border of New Jersey.
I'm in the Mid-Atlantic, so
you're in the Mid-Atlantic.
You're a northerner.
You're close there, and what you're doing here in southwest New Jersey could be drastically different than what's going on 2 miles down the road in East Pennsylvania. And there is no continuity. There's no consistent logic. And yeah, sure, you hear on all the press conferences, all the governors are working together, and they've all got their orders and things. But it's, to the average person, it's just so confusing. It's muddled, and there's no guidance. I mean, half the time, so like I work in government, and I do a lot to, with constituents. I do a lot of constituent services per my job, and I can't tell you how many times, a governor issues an order, and immediately I have an inbox flooded because it wasn't thoroughly explained. There wasn't a lot of interpretive guidance that can really help people, and they just want questions and answers.
The interpretive guidance is incredibly confusing as far as I'm
because
concerned.
Then
and
they
it's
send
also
you,
vague.
And
it's so vague. Yeah. Go ahead.
And the governors, and this isn't just a Maryland where we work problem or a New Jersey problem. It's a nationwide problem. The governors issue these orders, and then they say, hey, if you don't have an idea of whether this covers your business, go look at the federal guidelines. And then you go look at the federal guidelines, and that's a mess.
It is a mess.
Look, it's well, put out on their website, and you can go and look at it, but even then it doesn't considerably cover every single thing. And you get into this thing where you're starting to pick winners and losers. What businesses can stay open, which ones can stay closed.
That's going to be a lasting effect of when we finally do open 100%, is that there are going to be massive winners and massive losers. And one winner, just as an example, is Walmart.
Yeah.
It's like, so hear me out. Hear me out for this for a second. So Walmart, so let's just say you have a store that sells like old time albums, LPs, and you sell CDs, and you sell just because it's very retro, and then you're really into that thing, right? And you have a store that just does that. Under this order, you are closed because you are not an essential business.
But I can go to Walmart.
Meanwhile, you can go to Walmart and buy any of that stuff because they sell everything there. So Walmart it's a great example of how Walmart is going to be a big winner. The big company is going to get bigger.
For big businesses. I mean, I can't go buy books at a bookstore, but I can order them off Amazon and give Jeff Bezos another 10 of my dollars. And you know what? Another issue, the PPP just ran out, the Paycheck Protection Act.
We're going to talk about that in a little while.
Oh, we will? All right, I won't jump ahead of you, Mark.
No, it's really important because it goes to that. We're
picking important. Winners and losers, and all these small businesses that need to stay afloat and need this kind of help because they've been ordered to stay closed. They can't even get it, and the Congress won't even come to the table and just pass funding for it
to get more
because
funding.
Everybody else wants some kind of this, that, or the other thing for their district.
Absolutely,
and whatever their legislative agenda is.
So true. So one of my favorite United States senators, Garrick and Chris, is United States Senator John Kennedy. He's not related, by the way, to the Kennedy family, thankfully.
Doesn't talk like him either.
And he doesn't talk like him. He's from Louisiana, and he's just a straight-up shooter. He says in an interview that obviously coronavirus can kill you, but so can poverty, and it's just a brilliant statement. We have this clip, and I just wanted to say this. During the interview, he talked about how awful it is, and he's right, that so many thousands of people have died and will continue to die from coronavirus. And that's an awful thing.
Yeah.
But we also have to look at this objectively as well and say we are doing everything we can now to stop people from getting infected and to come up with a solution to keep people alive. And we've made enormous progress, but we also have to understand that America is rising, and at some point they're not going to listen to government because they want to go back to work and they need to eat. Yeah. And so we have a clip on this, and here it is.
And we've got to start talking about how to do that here. Once again, I'm not saying to put the economy ahead of public safety. But the fact is that both of them are important. We know that the coronavirus can kill you. but so can poverty.
Yes, there you go. I mean, he's so plain spoken. That's why I like him.
Yeah.
And I just want to make sure that everybody knows that during that entire interview, he talked about how awful it is, as I already set it up, about how many people are dying.
Yeah.
But he gets to the meat of the problem, which is there's no easy solution other than the fact that we've got to get back to work.
Yeah.
We've got to.
I want to expound on that a little bit. I think, people in the news, depending on who you watch or just what the common perception is that there's one side that's wants everything to stay shut down, and then there's one side that wants everything to just open up and throw caution to the wind. I don't think neither of those things are inherently true. I think what people really just want is to do this safely. We want to open business up, but we want to do it safely, where you're protecting yourself and your family, because coronavirus is here. Like we'll say it over and over again. It is a real deal, and it is a threat, but also people need to work too. And so we need to open it up safely.
And we're smart.
And that's what Joe Kennedy's talking about.
We're smart people.
Yeah.
John Kennedy. We're smart people. I know it's funny. John Kennedy is like John F. Kennedy, but he's not related to any of them. But he's from Louisiana. You can tell by the accent. But and here's the thing. This is why America is rising, because we are intelligent people. We do know how to social distance. We certainly want to protect ourselves.
We've done a great job at social distancing.
And why is it that we can go to Walmart, for example, and we can buy stuff there, fill up our carts with stuff, and then figure out how to social distance there, but we can't do it in small businesses across America?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I have a problem with this,
I agree.
Huge problem with this. And so, and I understand the public health issues and so forth, but it's really annoying to me.
And it's in industries that I just don't understand, where people view this as like a public health threat. Like if you want to go and sit on your boat in the middle of a lake, why can't I go sit on my boat by myself in the middle of the lake? There's nobody within X number of miles of me. And we saw the example of the paddleboarder in California. He's out by himself in the middle of the ocean paddleboarding, and they drove a patrol boat out there and arrested him.
Yes, they also had a helicopter as well.
And it's like, why is this?
Sir, get out of the ocean.
Yeah,
you must get out of the ocean now.
He's getting exercise. He's getting out. He's not near anybody. He's not hurting anybody.
How dare you paddleboard when no one else is in the entire Pacific Ocean?
God,
you must get out now, or you will be fined and go to jail.
Or you'll be dragged out by somebody who has to get 3 feet into your space. It's like, come on now.
That'd have been pretty funny if you just went out there like even farther and farther into the ocean. So you know what? America is rising against not just domestic threats, but we're also rising against foreign threats. And some of those foreign threats, of course, one of the ones that we all know about is the WHO, the World Health Organization. We have a clip of from MSNBC, just to be fair, because they carried Trump's speech about how he's going to cut WHO funding, or at least freeze WHO funding. And here is Donald Trump. Here's the clip.
I'm instructing my administration to halt funding of the World Health Organization while a review is conducted to assess the World Health Organization's role in severely mismanaging and covering up the spread of the coronavirus. Everybody knows what's going on there. American taxpayers provide between $400 million and $500 million per year to the WHO. In contrast, China contributes roughly $40 million a year, and even less.
So there you have it. So President Trump made that very, very clear. And of course, Nancy Pelosi, in the meantime, says that she is going to challenge Donald Trump's illegal move to freeze WHO funding. I mean, can you imagine, out of all the things you could spend your time on as Nancy Pelosi, you decide that you're going to challenge his move to freeze funding to a fundamentally corrupt organization?
Yeah.
Why would you continue funding it?
So I think if you had funded the WHO, it is for one of two purposes. It's either A, you have it for coordinating purposes, or B, you have it for medical purposes. Except the WHO receives less funding than your general community hospital, so it's not very effective in terms of treatment and things. And we don't need it to coordinate, because governments have the capacity to talk to each other without the WHO. I don't think it does anything and serves any of those purposes.
It's another layer.
It's basically, it's just a layer of bureaucracy. It's, it's this multinational corporation or multinational government that is supposed to,
under the guise of the
communication
UN.
Under the guise as you went, but it doesn't serve a purpose, that I think is really applicable right now, because quite frankly, the WHO has already dropped the ball. We give them all this money, and their reaction to coronavirus was poor at best. And so what's the purpose going forward?
During the month of January, Garrick, it was the most. Actually, people said, "Oh, well, the month of February was really important."
No,
actually,
the month of January, when it started, containment.
The month of January was the month when we needed the WHO to step up. And here's what the WHO said in the month of January, January 14th, the middle of the month. They said, preliminary investigations conducted by Chinese authorities have found no clear evidence of human-to-human transmission of the coronavirus identified in Wuhan, China.
Yeah.
This is on January 14th.
That's awful.
They're saying literally that there's no human-to-human transmission.
Taking China for its word.
And we lost absolutely critical time to protect the citizens of the United States.
The chief executive of the WHO was handpicked into that role by the Chinese government. And I mean, I saw an interview with him the other day where he wasn't ruling out the idea of stripping Taiwan of its WHO membership, which would just be an absolute atrocious violation of international rules and sovereignty. And, this is the kind of people that we're dealing with over the WHO, people who are political operatives of the Chinese government.
Absolutely.
And this isn't, us putting our tinfoil hat on here. this is pretty, commonly accepted beliefs and commonly factual things you can find out. Like this guy is, and a lot of these, high ups in the WHO, they take their marching orders and they take them in stride.
They do. And by the way, America is rising to foreign threats, unless you're a Democrat, of course, and you're Nancy Pelosi, who says, no, we shouldn't cut funding to the WHO. And also, unless you're Senator Chris Murphy, who's a Democrat from Connecticut, who basically says it's really the president's fault. It's not China's fault. He literally lets them off the hook. We have a clip on that, and here it is.
And the reason that we're in the crisis that we are today is not because of anything that China did. It's not because of anything the WHO did. It's because of what this president did.
That just speaks for itself. It's because of what the president did. It's not what the WHO did.
Is it
China.
Every other country in the world's fault then, too? I mean, this is where we're getting. We're going to ascribe the leader of every country blame because, we've all done very similar actions and it's just...
These are the people.
Chris Murphy is one of those guys who just kind of looks at Trump, sees what he does, and then argues the opposite. He just sticks his finger in the wind and sees which way the wind's blowing.
I agree. These are the people that want a shadow government. Yeah. These are the people that want power from the American people. And the question is, for podcast listeners and of course beyond, is would you give these people power knowing what we know today about them and China?
Chris Murphy. Look, in the Senate, there's doers and then there's hacks. And Chris Murphy, in my book, falls right into the hack category.
He really
does. I don't know
does.
what he does, and besides go and give sound bites on MSNBC.
Exactly. And so meanwhile, America is rising abroad, and we know this because Iranian ships, China nukes, Russian and North Korea are showing aggression. So all of our enemies, Iran, Russia, China, and North Korea, they're all posturing because they're trying to see, and they're probing to see, is the United States weak? And of course, that's what happens. We've talked about this briefly before. When a superpower is under siege, of course, your enemies try to probe to find out where your weaknesses are.
Yeah.
And this is happening. And America is, of course, technically under attack, but we're going to rise, and we are rising against those threats. Yeah. And by the way, I would never feel safe with Joe Biden.
No,
as commander-in-chief,
not pulling the
given what we
strings
have
of foreign policy. But hey, you list all of our, enemies out there and, people adversarial to us that are posturing, but we're doing the same. We're posturing as well. Japan's posturing, South Korea's posturing, England's posturing, and, it's important that, we maintain a lot of our foreign relationships and, maintain our level of respect on the world stage going forward and make sure that everybody understands that, we might be on the ropes right now, but we'll be fine.
Sure. And in the meantime, Democrats on Capitol Hill oppose an increase in the payment protection plan, which we briefly talked about before, which would, by the way, be targeted for small businesses.
Yep.
Although I would have to say this, they should put some additional language with the $250 billion that Republicans want to add to the current funding, which is now run out. The language should be really for small businesses.
Yeah. I saw a thing where Ruth Chris Steakhouse got $100 million. And some airport got
I don't know if that's true or not because I haven't followed up.
Yeah.
But here's what I do know. I wouldn't doubt it at all. And that needs to be corrected. It needs to be corrected by making money available for truly small businesses.
Yes.
And that should be done. And sadly, Senator Ben Cardin of Maryland stood up on the House floor and basically objected to, the Senate floor in the United States Senate, and Senator Ben Cardin basically objected to holding a unanimous voice vote, which basically effectively killed the addition of the $250 billion to the payroll protection plan.
And Nancy Pelosi goes out and she congratulates the Senate for opposing the funding. And then meanwhile, she does it in this video where she's, I guess, on the Late Show with somebody, James Corden or whatever, and she's got her $24,000 fridge because somebody like Googled what fridge she had.
Oh, of course.
And it's stocked with all this great food and ice
she's
cream
fine.
that the rest
She probably
of us
has someone getting her the food too. She doesn't have to, like they do the shopping for her.
It's tone deaf.
Yeah.
It's tone deaf.
Oh, it's crazy.
And you know,
do you have a clip of her, of Nancy Pelosi? Yeah. Let's hear this clip first. Let's talk about it. Here it is.
So last week when they came, they asked for $250 billion in 48 hours. I said, well, I don't think so. Let's see how we can open this up to many more people. So Chuck Schumer and I, and this all happened on the Senate side, and I congratulate the Senate Democrats. They went to the floor when Mitch McConnell went in for his $250. And they said they objected.
So they objected. They objected to the $250 billion on the Senate floor by the Democrats did, because, and she thinks that's a good thing.
I don't understand.
I mean,
that's jobs. That's people's paychecks. That's their livelihoods. That's their ability to feed, clothe their family, take care of themselves, combat the pandemic the best way that they can. And she's just on there saying, congratulations, you guys got in the way of that.
And you know what, Garrick? People have to understand, especially people, generally speaking, who aren't really familiar with the bill does. What it really does is it says to you, if you are an employer, we will loan you the money. You get this money. You have to keep everyone on the payroll.
Yes.
And you have to continue to pay them with this money. You can keep
your doors shut and not have people show up to work, but
yes.
You take this loan out, you pay your employees for the length of the emergency, and when all's said and done, the loan is forgiven.
If you do that.
If you do that.
If you don't do that.
If anybody gets
fired,
or it's a loan, you're paying it back with interest.
You're paying it back. So you have a huge incentive.
It's a direct stimulus, right, to hardworking employees.
Right to the actual employees, the
yes.
people that are hurting the most.
Yeah, you can't use it for any other purpose.
Yes, and the fact of the matter is you did mention Ruth's Chris, right?
Yeah.
So you have to remember this. Yes, it's a big corporation. They have tons of restaurants nationwide.
But they have employees.
But they had to use that money for their employees. And a small portion of the money could be used to cover their rent, because obviously they don't own all of these locations, and their utilities and so forth.
And that's fine with interest.
And even if, quite frankly, even if that money were forgiven to the extent that they kept those people on the payroll, that is a good thing.
Look, I understand, because I've been reading into it and I follow this, because a lot of this fiscal policy is really
it's
exciting to me, and it's important. And I understand that the Democrats want hospital funding, they want testing funding, they want all this other kind of funding for this, that, or the other thing. And I get that they want that. But I don't think that it's worth holding up people's jobs, because you don't have the luxury of being able to re-examine this bill a week from now. We can re-examine hospital funding, testing funding, and all this other stuff for weeks to come without, I think, any significant impact on people's lives. But you hold up PPP funding for 3 days, companies are going to start laying employees off, they're going to send people home, they're going to close their doors, and they might not ever come back.
Because the program was way oversubscribed, understandably, that it was underfunded. And of course, since we have a system in the United States where you have Democrats and Republicans, and we have a divided government at the national level, people have to actually work together to be able to come. So the last bill was a compromise, and which meant that obviously the Democrats wanted money for government and government institutions. The Republicans wanted it for small businesses and their employees. And of course, this is what we got. We don't have enough money, and this is what we're left with. So hopefully Nancy Pelosi and Senator Ben Cardin and Senator Chris Van Hollen will step up. We sure hope so.
Yeah, all of them. Everybody in Congress.
So next up, we have the dumbest bill in America. That's right, it's the dumbest bill in America. And do we have some lead up to the dumbest bill in America, Mr. Assistant Producer?
Of course.
Here it is.
Dum 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 dum.
And boy, does it apply to this one, because the dumbest bill in America is a bill that bans school suspensions.
Oh boy.
It bans school suspensions. So why are we banning school suspensions? Well, by the we, it would be California. California Senate Bill 419, introduced by State Senator Nancy Skinner, will ban suspending students for disruptive behavior all the way up to 8th grade, but technically when you read the bill, it's for all grades. From kindergarten all the way to 12th grade. And, of course, Governor Gavin Newsom just signed the bill. He just signed the bill into law this week.
Governor Kendall.
Yes, Governor Kendall. Where's Barbie? Well, I don't think, well, we won't go there. So State Senator Nancy Skinner wants to ban the schools from being able to suspend students. And so what is the practical effect of this? Well, I can tell you from my own experience, and I'm sure that you guys have stories as well, even though you don't have children, but I'm hearing all of the time about parents and teachers who are saying, hey, look, we have this child, the child is unruly, but to the point that the child is actually violent. And the child came at me with a pen and actually, hit me with the pen, and it broke the skin. And I went to the school principal, and he did nothing. The superintendent, they're like, oh, our hands are tied. We can't do anything. And of course, what the progressives say is that if you suspend the child and you send the child home, that doesn't teach the child anything. But of course, as a conservative, what we say is if you suspend the child and you send the child to an alternative school for, let's just say, a week or 2 weeks or just a few days, the child will see that that alternative school is full of some really, really bad kids, and they probably don't ever want to go back there again. And there's a teaching moment here, okay? There's a teaching moment. I agree with the superintendents and the educators that if you send them home, the parents are probably working anyway, and so they can't be home alone. But there is an alternative, and we used to have, and many school districts still do, these alternative schools where the kids go to and they're given, it's like a shot across their bow, right?
I think a lot of it. So I might have a different belief on the way to address it. I think that, suspensions are fine. I think a lot of it, though, starts in the home, and I think it's the way we raise our children, and it's the things that we instill in them from a young age.
But how does the school, once the kid gets to school, because the kid hasn't gotten that education, what is the school supposed to do?
Yeah, I know, and that's tough.
The bill says you can't suspend them.
You can't suspend them, and you're taking a tool out of their belt to address it. And I think, again, I understand both sides on this one a little bit, but I really do think that, if this is something we want to address, I think we got to nip it on the butt before it ever gets to school. I think, it's got to be about how children interact and what they learn about respect and manners, and that, I think for a lot of kids nowadays when they get threatened with suspension, they just don't care. I think for a lot of them it's like, whatever.
I'm not sure.
Really? I'm not that far removed from high school.
I
think there's a lot of kids.
You mean if they went to an alternative school?
Alternative school, that's different now. Because now you're talking about uprooting their whole existence.
It's an alternative school.
I think the concept of suspension where you just go sit in a room all day, because in my high school, we had in-school suspension and out-of-school suspension. Most suspensions were in school unless you were fighting.
And that's the mistake. There's no teaching moment.
Yeah, but when you sit in school suspension, you go to a separate room and you get your classwork, and a teacher just kind of sits there and watches you. And there's no, there's no teaching moment like you said, but I think there's a lot of kids that just liked it. They liked to be by themselves or over there in the corner, and it didn't do much to teach them. And so I think a lot of it's a lot of nuance. I think every kid learns differently, and every kid responds differently.
But do you think an alternative school would work instead of putting them in a classroom that is empty?
For some kids, I think for some kids it would work, and I think for other kids it wouldn't work. But that's the nature of the beast. I don't think there's one size fits all things, and that we should approach everything.
And sometimes an alternative school should be a military school.
Yeah,
because there's some children that since there's no discipline at home, they're acting out. We know that they're acting out in school. Yeah. And by the way, here's an option. Right? Yeah. Now, granted, the taxpayers would have to pay for it, but guess what? It's better than ruining the educations of all the other 30 children in the classroom because you have this one kid that's completely out of control and maybe outright dangerous. Yeah. So here's Nancy Skinner, the bill's sponsor, about a charter school crisis in Oakland, California, and how they adversely affect public schools. We're going to talk about this because it directly relates to her banning school suspensions. And here is the clip.
There's definitely a charter crisis, and if we look at the situation that our Oakland Unified School District is in, that unfortunately, the kind of abandonment of our public schools, and by some parents who had good motivations, and the growth of charters has reduced the enrollment in our Oakland public schools, which of course the state funds schools based on per daily enrollment. So when enrollment drops, then it really affects the ability for Oakland Unified School District to support their children in the way that all of us want.
So there you go, guys. It's really about, according to the bill sponsors, it's about public school funding and the fact that so many children and parents are now sending their children to charter schools, which is indeed another choice for parents to send their kids to. They're still publicly funded in California, but the parents send their kids to a charter school, and then they're taking out a public school. The public schools lose the funding for that child. And so here's the thing. If you keep more bad kids in the classroom, are parents going to keep their kids in public school, or are they going to send them to different schools? So she's making a problem worse with this bill.
I also don't understand the argument, because from my understanding, in a lot of these states that are very liberal and very for pro-school unions and things like that, even if you take your kid out of public school and put him into private school, you still pay the tax dollars that are still earmarked for the schools.
True.
And so while you may be losing some of the, mandated federal funding based on school populations and things, you should still be able to work within the system that you have, because that's one less student you have to, provide for. Because technically, from my opinion of how school funding should be worth, every kid should have an amount of money, and that amount of money should, work for them. If that kid's not there, then you don't have the money for that kid, but that money was already going to that kid anyway.
And look, so you said you don't understand. Well, here's one of the underlying reasons. Here's another one. First, of course, because she wants all of the money to go to public schools, and she doesn't want there to be charter schools because
she thinks the state knows better on how to raise your kid than you do.
Absolutely. And we also have a clip on the other reason, because the other underlying reasons, according to the bill sponsor, Nancy Skinner, State Senator Nancy Skinner of California, is that there's race, there's sexual preference, there's gender preference, and those children are being disproportionately expelled or suspended from school, in her opinion. But we actually have a clip from one of the advocates for this particular bill, and here it is.
African American males and females, they're suspended at a higher rate, especially the African American males. But I've dealt with a lot of these cases, and unfortunately, I've had kids that have been suspended for sometimes 3 months.
So let's then talk about reforming how you suspend children and do the alternative school option, right?
Let's give them school choice, Mark.
Let's
let these parents put their kids in better schools. Let's put them in schools that can best serve their kids, because they know what their kid needs and how to get it. Let's not, start cramming kids into, zip-coded schools and making them go to schools because they're failing, and then just have our hands out asking for more funding for them.
And what difference does it make what gender or what sex or what color a student is if the student is truly causing harm to the classroom to the extent that no one else can learn? Then why would that matter? Why would that matter? I mean, if you want to collect those statistics, then by all means do so. And then do something with those statistics and try to fix what's happening in their home.
Yeah.
Let's do that.
Yeah, let's fix their schools. Let's fix, everybody all across the board. White schools that are underprivileged, black schools that are underprivileged. I think they should all have the choice to go where they want to go.
But what if there are no consequences? And that's what she wants. She wants consequence-free actions in public schools. You can do whatever you want, and you're not going to get suspended. Everything's going to be fine.
Yeah, and I think some of these areas where they probably geographically map demographics, financial status, and things like that. I would imagine that a lot of these schools that have these higher rate of suspensions are probably less valued in terms of academic attainment. And I think this also goes back to our point about school choice and why conservatives believe in it. It's that, we should give people in those schools the option, the opportunity to go pursue better educations and get out of these cyclical cycles of failing schools, failing children.
But not if you're State Senator Nancy Skinner, because that is anathema to what she wants. She wants all in on public schools.
Just wait till
nothing else, no matter how bad the school is.
Teachers Union gets a hold of her saying anything like that. Mark.
Absolutely. Well, that is the dumbest bill in America, banning school suspensions. And that is it for Mark and the Millennials. Thank you for joining Mark and the Millennials. This is Mark Fisher. Thank you to our millennial, Garrick Ross.
Always a pleasure.
And of course, our producer, Adam Couture, and our assistant producer, Christopher Hopkins. Check us out on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and our website. See you next time.